Hello, here we are with Cassie Jaye, the director of The Red Pill, who has agreed to answer some of our questions, and needless to say, I am nervous AF, so let's start with something light. How are you enjoying the UK?
Oh, I love it. This is my first time here, and I've only been here 4 days now, and I have to leave tomorrow, so I'm a little bummed about that. But I hope to come back, and I'm glad you guys didn't ban me from entering England, so thank you for that.
Trust me, there will be protests in the street, and, you know, lots of campaigns and petitions to make sure you're not banned, so it's okay. Shall we hit straight into the meat of the questions, the interview?
Yeah. What men's issues are you sort of disappointed that you didn't necessarily get to go into into the movie, or didn't go into as much as you'd have liked?
Oh, that's a great question, because there's so many. Let me try to name off a few. The circumcision section is only about a minute long. I had a 20-minute edit that was very powerful but very intense for especially Americans to handle, so I ended up cutting it down. And then, false accusations. I don't really go into that and explore it in depth, and I would have loved to cover that more. And also rape culture, you know, that really introduced me to men's issues, and I never really visit that again at the end of the film. I did plan on doing that, but there just wasn't enough time, and rape culture is such a very deep rabbit hole. And the wage gap, that really affected me as a feminist, learning about the myth of this, wage gap, the belief that it's actually discrimination against women, and realizing that it's the choices, that the different choices men and women make, and that really affected me in my understanding gender issues and the misinformation out there about feminism, and or that feminists perpetuate. And lastly, the success object, sex object kind of lens that Warren Farrell talks about in The Myth of Male Power, that was really eye-opening for me to learn, because in feminism you learn about women in the media are treated as sex objects, and that's what I really experienced when I was acting in LA when I was younger. And I had never thought of the flip side of how men are treated like success objects, and seeing that with especially millennial men, where so women are out earning college degrees and higher enrollment rates in universities, and men are really falling behind. But we still live in a kind of relationship culture where hypergamy still exists, where women want to marry up in status. And so here are all these women succeeding, and they're saying we're all the good men, but it's because their expectations for men are higher, and guys are falling behind, and they don't realize that if we help men and boys, there'll be everyone will do better. So the success objects thing, I think, could have gone more into with that.
I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tandem from our proposed script that we just mocked up. You speak about these gender relations and hypergamy and how people involve with each other and interact. How do you think feminism has influenced gender relations, and not just on a societal scale, but how do you think it influenced your gender relations when you interacted with men?
So from my feminist perspective, how it influenced that? So before making The Red Pill, I was a very staunch feminist, and I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years now, and I've been making the film for 3.5 years. So for the first 2 years of my relationship with my boyfriend, because I was a staunch feminist, I always found ways to argue with him. I would start an argument at least once a month at least. And
you weren't one of those, were you?
I was.
Oh, no.
I was. I'm so sorry, and I feel really bad.
You did a great film. We'll let you off.
But I've learned.
Just
I've
this
changed.
once, though.
Yeah. And but I mean, it was really too bad, because he never voiced his frustrations in his gender role, or what he faced every day. And I just figured because he didn't complain that he had nothing to complain about. And so, my feminist perspective was I always looked for the ways women were disadvantaged and the ways men were advantaged, but never the other way around. I didn't look at my privileges as being a gender privilege, and I didn't look at his disadvantages as being valid because I believed he was privileged. So, it really actually created a toxic kind of relationship from my feminist perspective. I was causing it to be toxic, but I've changed after making the film. Yeah.
I'll go with one.
Do you want to point the microphone at yourself?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. So, what do you? What's your opinion in regards to how do you view the feminist movement? How do you view the men's rights movement? And how do you view it's the bulk of the question, the labels of the two? since you no longer identify as a feminist?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I'll start with the labels because that's something I actually wanted to include a chapter in the film about labels and how it can be a very divisive kind of thing when you're trying to communicate with people about issues, because when you have a label, if the other person critiques that movement, if you critique feminism, then feminists take it personally because that's their label. So, you know, I don't call myself a men's rights activist after making this film, and there's many reasons for that, but one of them is I don't see it as the whole answer, because it really is a counterbalance to the power that feminism has today to try to balance it out and talk about men's issues. But within feminism, so how I view feminists, originally when I became a feminist in 2004, I thought the only question about whether or not you're a feminist is, do you believe in gender equality? And if the answer is yes, then you're a feminist. And that's why I signed up. I thought it was just the belief in gender equality. And it didn't take until 2013 started to make the Red Pill that I would interview men's rights activists and learn about men's issues, and then I would go to feminists and ask them, well, what about all these men's issues? And they would dismiss every one or deny that men had any issues. And so I realized feminism wasn't the movement for gender equality, it was really just focusing on women's issues, and oftentimes at the expense of what men were dealing with and telling them to be quiet, sit in the back of the room because you're the privileged gender. And
I saw a lot of misunderstanding of the men's rights activist position. Did you notice a lot of that, and where do you think that comes from?
Misunderstanding. Well, it definitely comes from the media. I mean, the mainstream media has made it their goal to smear anything that's valid about the men's rights movement. They want to take that down and put labels on them: misogynist, racist, homophobic, bigot, to tell people who don't know anything about the men's rights movement that they're not worth looking into. You know, if you put that label on them, they're not worth looking into. And so, you know, the men's rights movement it definitely has, terrible branding and, you know, marketing out there. Most people don't know what their platform is, so, you know, I hope this film will educate people on that.
You mentioned a moment ago that you don't identify as a men's rights activist because of its, limiting or trying to misappropriate your position. Is it not possible to be a men's rights activist, which what I identify as, but also as a women's rights activist, which I also identify as, because they both fall under the sort of umbrella term of human rights activist? Is that possible, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think people can hold, you know, both labels, and that's another thing with labels is, you give yourself your own label of what you believe that to mean. So a lot of people, even at the screening tonight, said I'm an egalitarian because I believe that's for both genders. And then you can say I'm both for women's rights and men's rights, and you know, an activist in that. And I definitely support anyone choosing their own labels. And part of why I am not adopting a new label is because I don't want this film to. First of all, I'm a filmmaker that made a film about men's rights activism, and you know, I'm not a men's rights activist. I'm not going, making my life's goal and going to protests and doing that sort of thing. But I did make a film about this topic that I really care about now, and I would absolutely support, the fight for men's rights and issues, as well as women's rights. But yeah, I think labeling, it's just a touchy issue, and I have so many friends and family that are feminists.
Most of the time, labeling is more about trying to tell people the closest thing to what matches your beliefs. It's not necessarily.
Well, I mean, it seems because she just told that you're going to be going soon. We've only got time for one more question. So, what do you think the best question would be to ask?
Well, crikey, what do you want to do? Yes, let's do the gradual transitioning away from feminism question. So, at the end of the film, we get hit with the wonderful bombshell, wonderful in my opinion, that you no longer identify as a feminist. And for the sake of the video, I shall explain when we hosted the first screening in Bath of the film, that as soon as I heard you say that, I was standing there clapping, my tongue was hanging out. It was like the old cartoons, it's really quite
almost a standing ovation.
Oh no, it was a standing ovation, but my legs weren't working quite well enough because of how amazing the film was. So you speak about, no longer being a feminist. Was it a gradual transition that eventually you realised, I'm no longer a feminist? Or was there something that along this transition that said to you, I can't accept this label anymore?
There was something that happened. So you may be aware that I did a Kickstarter campaign in October of 2015, and I put it all out there for the internet to watch my video pitching the film I wanted to make, which was a balanced film looking at the men's rights movement, something that's never been explored in a film before. And I was a feminist at the time, so I said it's my journey, my perspective, learning about these issues. Will you help fund this film so it can be completed? And it was a 4-week campaign. The first 2 weeks we were a sinking ship. No one really cared. We didn't have enough funding that it looked like we would be successful. And then it all changed when Milo Yiannopoulos, I didn't say that right, Milo Yiannopoulos, wrote an article about the film and about the struggle making this film. And then we had all these free speech activists and people against censorship go and support the film. And once the Kickstarter...
A criticism I heard from a feminist was that it was mainly funded by MRAs, but that isn't actually true, is it?
No, and so many, and I know who the people were that funded because they all wrote in saying why they funded it. They said, I've never heard about the men's rights movement, but I believe in free speech. I believe that, there should be different perspectives in film. And so we also had some feminists fund the Kickstarter, so it's, all across the board. But so when we received all that support, that's when I saw bloggers, journalists, writers that were feminists coming to attack me and smear my name and my reputation and discredit me, and even people who supported my previous work coming to attack me for making this film, and the film wasn't even completed. But I couldn't believe the amount of backlash I got from feminists and also publications that I have trusted for a long time, writing outright lies about me, and they're feminist-leaning publications, and so that contributed to having to drop the label.
So just before we end, because we're going to have to be quick, put into more simplistic terms, ultimately what it was that turned you away from the feminist label wasn't necessarily the issues that men face, but was the actions of feminists towards you that turned you away from them.
Yeah, the latter. Thank you for defining that. I never thought about it in that way, but yeah, that's accurate. Yeah.
Because as an MRA, a lot of our work is how to get people to sympathise with our cause, especially people on the other side of the camp, because, whilst it is a war, you have to go,
sorry.
I was going to finish my sentence, but it's been wonderful. Thank you for doing this. You're a
so
darling.
Nice to meet you.
Yes.
Thank you so
do
much.
Do we handshake or can I get a hug?
So
Thank
nice
you.
to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Hugging over the table. Thank you.